Or shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers in grid Papa uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma. The Resilient Warrior Nation podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morgan. I'm very pumped about our guest today. Our guest is Angel Cortes. Angel was in the U.S. Army for 8 years with deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. He was part of the 75th Ranger Regiment and is currently an instructor at Defense Strategies Group, which has a training facility in Beverly Hills. The way that I hooked up with Angel is I interviewed Zach Ferguson, as you guys remember, a few episodes ago, former Navy SEAL. And Angel are you partners in the business, Angel, or are you an instructor?
Yeah.
You're part. That's what
I'm actually one of the founders and part.
That's what I thought. So Angel and Zach are partners and co-founders of Defense Strategies Group, which also includes Mike O'Dowd, correct? Another former Navy SEAL?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for all your training needs, you guys head over to them in Los Angeles area. And I am pleased to introduce my next guest, Angel Cortes. Angel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. As I was telling you before, I was watching another podcast that you had did a few years ago, and it's just an honor to have you on. Your military career was quite impressive, but you as a man, as I said before, like this is when you think of the definition of a man, just listen to Angel's story and how he conducts himself and how he puts his priorities in order, including his family first. And if every man would do that, this world would be a different place. But I am honored to have you as a guest. So let's start from your youth. Tell us where you grew up. Tell us about your family life, siblings.
So I'm the second oldest of six. I grew up in Southern California. I'm the first one in my family to be born in the U.S. And my parents worked. They worked real hard. But my dad had an alcoholic problem.
Right.
They were very young. And at the time, I didn't know they were young, right? They just
Wow.
you just know they're your parents, right? But just to give you an idea of how young they were, my mom had me at 16. My dad was just a few years older, so they're the young individuals, and we grew up pretty poor, pretty poor. And when you grow up in low income communities, there's certain things that come with those environments. It's guns, drugs, and violence and gangs. And for the most part, I stayed away from all of it. And I tried to be just an average kid, but it's kind of hard because, like I said, I was the first one in my family to be born here, so no one else speaks English. Spanish was at the house.
Right.
The radio was Spanish. TV was Spanish. So I would go home. I would go to school, and reading and writing was super tough for me. Trying to communicate with my teachers and people around me. So as you can imagine, I'm kind of getting it from all angles. I'm being made fun of at school because I don't really know how to read and write that well, or I have wear the same clothes over and over.
Yeah.
Or if I do have something that's new, it's kind of like the knockoff brands, like the Adidas has one more extra stripe on the shoe, and and at the house where I'm getting beat.
Right.
My mom's telling us that we're ruining her life, and it's just bad, all around. But I just thought that was normal. I thought it was normal, and at an early age, I've come to realize I've been good at accepting whatever situation I've been in, and later on in my adult life, that kind of really helped me out in the military. But at that moment, like for example, just to give you an idea of
Really?
how used to certain things that I was, is that it was like, for example, multiple times we didn't go to sleep with food. At an early age, I already knew that it was dumb to ask if we were going to eat dinner or lunch, because guess what? There is no lunch, there is no dinner, so don't even ask for it. And I thought that was normal. And I would go to school, And most of my, calorie intake for the whole week was the meals that we got for breakfast at school and lunch. And people knew that, hey, if you don't want to eat it, give it to Angel, because
Yeah.
Angel wants it. Or my teachers would bring us like bowls of spaghetti, and it's not like teachers make millions of dollars, but I remember multiple times these teachers that loved us would bring us Tupperware of spaghetti and
That's tough.
meatballs, and we would just gobble it up all right there. And that was the norm for me growing up. And it took me, yeah, it took me a while to realize that it isn't normal. Um, and I stayed in trouble. I stayed away from gangs until I became an age of where you're not a little kid anymore, and the gangs are now asking you, who do you roll with? I remember the first time I was on a skateboard, and this guy asked me. He's like,
Hmm.
he goes, yo, he goes, hey, what do you bang? And I was like, bang. And the way I answered it, he already knew, like, oh, this guy has
Right.
no idea what the hell I'm talking about. And then he just like let me go. And within that same year, I found
Now,
out
how
that he
old
was
are you when
asking
they're
me,
starting to come
what
at you
neighborhood
now,
was
these
I from,
gangs?
and I wasn't. And
12 years old. Okay.
I hung around with the skateboarders and stuff like that, and uh, 12, yeah, 12, and but not till I was 13 is when there was this incident where one of the gang members. At this point, I already know well enough, like, who the gangs are, and the
Right.
sides, and the names and the initials on the walls, and who's who. And one of them stole her skateboard, and I didn't like those gang members, and I remember wanting to get that skateboard back, but it's not like I was gonna beat up the guy, because it was like 10 of them, and it was only a few of us. And even
Yeah.
then, most of my friends weren't fighters. Like, that's not who they were. But then and there, I realized, like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna stand up for myself, or is this gonna be my everyday life? I was already getting it at home, and I was already getting it growing up, in elementary, and now it's junior high. I was like, you know what, man, no, enough is enough. And I started hanging out with this one gang, because they were like, hey, oh, we don't like these guys. And I was like, hey, as a matter of fact, I don't like those guys either. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was getting myself
Yep.
into, and I didn't really realize why I was joining in. But the reality is, I was joining because I had no sense of a family. Nobody really cared for me, and there's these guys who are like, "Hey, man, we'll protect you, we'll back you
Yeah.
up." And then the older guys are
They're
buying
almost like predators.
pizza
They're
and
almost like
beer, and
pedophiles
and,
grooming
and, and it
children.
looks like, I'm
And
like,
in a
look,
way,
man,
they are
these guys
grooming,
care
but it's
more
for a
about me
different
than
purpose.
than
These.
anybody else. So,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
Oh, 100%. I 100%. They see something, especially the older guys, and they're like, "This guy right here, this guy can join," and they quickly saw how devoted I was, how driven I was, because within a short amount of time, I went from just, hey, wanting to hang out, to being jumped into, controlling a crew within the gang. And we were producing like 90% of all of the violent
Yeah.
activity that was being done from that gang was the crew that I was controlling. And at first it just started like, hey, I just want backup, I don't want to be messed
Yep.
with. But little did I know by hanging out with this one gang, not only do I
Yeah.
have
Just like
beef with everyone
inherit
else in the
instantaneously
gang,
everything
but
else that
all
they
their
have going for them.
friends and whatever gangs they're from. So all of a sudden, I have beef with people I'd never even met in my entire life, and I just didn't want. Yeah, and obviously, I'm going through puberty, so you got this testosterone thing going on, you got the pride thing going on, you got the peer pressure thing going on, and obviously, I was angry inside for all the stuff that was been happening to me for years. Um, and I got stabbed when I turned 15 on my 15th birthday. I got stabbed in the head and in the back, um, and that made me dive deeper into it, because I was like, you know what? No, they're going to do this to me. And that's when I started buying guns, and I started selling drugs.
Right.
And, not to justify anything, but I first started selling drugs because I was tired of being made fun of for not having clothes. So I wasn't buying gold chains and cars or whatever. I was just buying clothes. I was buying food for my brothers and my sisters. Nobody told me to take care of my brother and my sister, but I was like, you know what? Hey guys, we're going to the mall. No more are we going to be being made fun
Yeah.
of,
No, you just
for
want to
wearing the
fit
same
in.
clothes
Yeah.
or wearing knockoff clothes or whatever. What do you guys want? And it's not even like we're buying Gucci. I'm just buying them Vans and Converse and skateboard brands. Yeah, I just want to fit in. And I was deep in it, and next thing you know, we're in shootouts. We're doing this. We're doing that. And every single time when I
Yeah.
thought that I would get caught, or this is the one thing
Any
that's going to
arrests for
get
you at this
us,
point?
and you know what? I realized, look, man, this is not it. By now, I'm 17, and I was like, look,
Yeah.
no, I've been lucky because um, it's a little bit of luck and also using my noodle. um,
Okay.
I would go to the community college or the adult further
Really?
education school programs, all the CSI classes, and I would take the CSI classes because I wanted to see what the cops were looking for. So
Mm-hmm.
I developed these protocols that anytime we did something serious, everything that you were wearing from head to toe, we would burn, throw away. Whatever was being used, ammunition of that caliber and that weapon was gone. It didn't matter if we just bought it that day before or it's gone.
Yeah.
Like, I remember one time my friend was like, "Oh, dude, these are my new Air
Shoot them
Force
while you
Ones." I was
work
like,
so you
"I
can
don't
put in
care.
work.
You knew what the protocol was. After something serious happens, sorry." And yep. And
Yeah. Dead end.
but I was like, you know what? I knew,
Yep.
I knew there was no this. There, it's not a life. Like yeah, Scarface. It's awesome, but what happens at the end? You know, American Gangster. It's all cool and it looks awesome in the beginning, but what happens at the end? Like all these movies, is they're telling you a story, blood in, blood out. At the end. It's
Yeah.
the message, and
And let
the
me tell you
beginning
something
is
about
during
that,
that
brother, too.
time. I would not
When
pay
you get into that
attention towards
life,
the end. I
everyone's
didn't
got the
care
no
about the
snitch
end part. I
policy.
just
I
liked the
can't tell you how
beginning.
many
That's what caught my
interrogations I've been
attention.
in. You have serious enough
But
charges, man. Every one of those cats is giving up the rest of those cats. I've seen it time and time again, man. So forget that loyalty because that shit goes right out the window when it's your ass on the line, too. They don't care about you.
yep, 100%. And it was a combination of me realizing, and obviously, at this point, I've had interactions with gang unit, I've had an interaction with regular cops, and believe it or not, most of us, at least from what I saw, we like cops. We respect cops in a way, like, but we know it's their job. If you get caught, hey, you got caught. We're playing a game, cat and mouse, right? But when the cops would sit us down and they would talk to us, and I would make it sound like I'm not listening. I knew I was like, yo, this
Yeah.
guy is right. Like I know he's right, and I'm like, fuck, man, like. But what am I gonna do? What are my options at that point? What are my options? And somebody told me, they're like, Angel, they're like, you do all the work, you lead these guys. They're like, the older heads don't even back you up on serious things. When you got stabbed, did any of them
Mm-hmm.
do anything? And I was like, no, they gave you the tools for you to go do something, but where was that? Or when
No.
this happened, or when you needed help in this situation, where were they? And I realized, you know what? They don't really care about me. Um, and I started having this internal battle of like, look, man, I think I'm wrong. And then I realized, man, I am wrong. And then me being in charge of the crew, I had to. I remember I put him in my friend's garage, and I was like, "Hey, man, I realized, I led us down the wrong path. This is not it. We I'm not saying we have to be bitches. I'm not saying we have to get punked. I'm not saying we can't make money because at this point we're making money. But I'm like, look, man, you got to go back to school. And if you can't go back to
Mm-hmm.
school, you got to go to a continuation program, and you got to get your GED. You got to get a real job. And look, man, it's going to be tough. And I remember some of them had already been feeling. I would assume they were already been thinking that. or they saw the way that I was acting because I didn't want to hang out with the main gang members
Yeah.
anymore, and I was kind of just doing my own thing. And then some of them even questioned it. Like they're like, "Hey, man, are
Yeah.
you sure? Are you sure this is the right move?" And I was like, "Look, man, I don't know, but there's no way. There's no way this is it." And I addressed certain things that were going to be in all of our heads. Like, look, we've been doing a lot of things, and some people are not going to let us be, and we have to make that choice. So we talk to them and be like, "Look, man, we're out. Certain things had happened. So you either want to walk away and hey, let it be, or we're not pussyfooting around. So what do you want?"
How
And
many guys is this that's
I
telling
remember
them
the
that
one I told the
we're
gang. I
trying to
remember
get
I
out or we're
remember
getting out?
being nervous
How
and
many
scared, but
guys?
I mean
You
at
and
that
how many
point we
other
were the
guys?
muscle. So who were they gonna send? We
8
were
of
the
them.
guy.
Okay. 80 guys.
What was that? It was 8 of us. It was 8 of us. It was 8 of us, and we were doing all of it. And I'm talking about, I say 90%. It was probably 100%. We were doing all of it, and and it was funny. The guys who I thought would
That's
understand were
amazing.
the ones who had the biggest issues, and the dudes who I thought would have the biggest issues, they didn't even care. They were like, okay, you're whatever. And some of the gangs that we had beef with, were okay. They were like, okay, if you're fucking out, I've known you because I went to 3 junior
Right.
highs, so I made a lot of friends and knew a lot of people. So if I went to this junior high, for the most part, those kids went to that gang, and then the other junior high I went to.
Yeah.
So these kids are already known me for a while, right? Um, but there was some people that were not going to let it be, and actually my exit from the
Affiliation.
gang
Yeah.
life was actually the most violent time
What, they jumped you out,
of my entire military,
essentially? Oh,
my entire gang, what you want to call it, career.
yeah.
Yeah. No, they no. We're like, we're leaving. Like, what are you gonna do? They couldn't do anything, and it was the perfect storm because something had happened. I don't know exactly what, but some of the older heads went to prison. So it worked out. Some older heads went to prison. We were the muscle, and we left. And the guys that were left, well,
Yeah.
they didn't really. They just cared about drugs, women, and they weren't and whatever
Yeah. There's
nonsense
no
they were
long term
into.
strategy.
It wasn't rapping the hook because for sure they weren't doing it. We were the ones doing it. So yeah, so you know what? But out of the 8 of us, so there's myself. I made it okay. Two of them that were cousins are okay. One went. Both of them went out of state now. Um, Two, I have no idea what happened. Um, One went back, and then another one was
Okay.
I saw him. He wasn't in the gang life, but it was sad because
Oh,
he kind of got lost in drugs.
yeah.
Um, and then the last one went to federal prison for trying to rob a bank. Yeah, so he got out of the gang life, but met some other guys, and then they were like, "Hey,
Oh,
we should
really?
we should
Whew.
rob a bank."
How much time they get
And
for that?
then and then it wasn't just that they only
That's a
robbed the bank,
lot.
but it's that they had automatic. Um, yeah, I don't know, but they and it was funny because he was one of the dudes who I thought would not do something like that. I was worried about
Right.
some of the guys trying to go back in or whatever, getting lost in drugs or whatever. But
That's nuts.
I thought he would be good.
Yeah. Want to hear a good bank
And
robbery
he's
story?
the
So I'm a
one who
cop in
actually
Atlanta, get a
did the
call for a bank
craziest
robbery. We
fucking
show
thing.
up.
And
They just hit the
is
bank. And it was one guy.
maybe he's out
And
there
a
somewhere. I
lady's
don't
like,
know.
here's his note. So I kind of bent down. The countertop was a little bit high. And I could see it was handwriting on the top, but underneath it was I could see it was like it looked like a paycheck stub. So I take my pen, I flip it over. This moron wrote, give me all your money or something like that on the back of his paycheck stub, which had a social security number. So two FBI agents get there. They're like, what's going on, officer? I'm like, solved it already, boys. They're like, what? I'm like, I cannot believe this, but I think this is his paycheck
Um,
stub. There's a social security number on there. So I give one of the agents my cell phone number. He calls me 2.5, 3 hours later. I was like, we got him. He was at his house. It was his paycheck. I'm like, you got to be shitting me. You're that stupid and you're robbing banks. Brother, you can't make this up. So unbelievable. All right, so you're now 17. Just got out of the gang. You're 17, right?
nope. Yep. So I'm 17. I first started hanging around when I was 14. So now I'm almost about to turn 18. And this entire time, I've always loved the military. I've always like in the hood, you have basically almost like three different ways to have a pass, and that's
Right.
sports, the military, or you're a rapper or something. Other than that, like that's how you get credibility, right? So we always, even though we might have not liked the law when they caught up to us, we if you're in the military, that's different, right? People looked up to dudes in the uniform, and I've always wanted to join. I've always wanted to be like them. And again, I didn't understand at the moment, but now why I understand is I thought the gang life was going to give me this and that, and it
Yep.
wasn't. It's the reason why I'm in the gangs, but I would watch anything that was military on National Geographic at my friend's house because he had cable, or all those movies. It said that they had exactly what I was looking for. What I wanted was, they loved each other, they fought for each other, they protected each other,
Yeah.
right? And they
Yeah.
were men, and that's what I wanted, and I joined the gang, but that wasn't. I had the right mindset, but the wrong environment. So I was like, 9/11 had happened. I was in sixth grade. I didn't think I was going to be able to make the war, but I remember when I was in sixth grade and 9/11 happened. I remember I knew what that meant. That meant we're under attack, and now we're going to go to war. And and I remember thinking, I remember feeling bad because I wasn't going to be able to help, because growing up by my parents is every single time, like, whether we're having lunch or dinner, I would we would be told of how lucky we were to be born here, and how great this country is. So and my mom would sign up for any state or federal program, and so we were raised on food stamps. So when the country that
Hmm.
protected and fed my family every now and
Right.
then, and gave us this opportunity, I was like, look, it's under attack, so now I want to help it. But little did I know I was going to make the war. So so I remember I walked in with my little spiel that I had memorized, and I told the recruiter something along the lines like, "Hey, I've been watching a lot of National Geographic documentaries, and I'm seeing that these things called IEDs are killing all our soldiers. Can we?
Yeah.
I want a job that goes after those people, or look or finds those IEDs, and how what do I
Yeah.
do?"
Definitely unique
And I
passion.
remember both recruiters was like their jaws just dropped because they're like, look, and they're like, nobody
Oh
wants
yeah.
to look for IDs, unless you can. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I had no idea what I was talking about, and I was like, yeah, or we'll go after the people, whatever. And so they're like, hey, you can either be EOD or combat engineer. And they told me about the EOD. And at the time, I was like, man, besides math and PE, I failed everything else. I was like, oh, there's
Yep.
no way I'm going to make EOD. EOD, they were telling me all the schooling and all this and that. And then they told me about combat engineer. And I was like, you know what? I'll be a combat engineer. Um, but I told him, I was like, but I'm not 18, so I actually have to wait. And he's like, actually, you don't have to be 18. You can be 17 and a half. Um, and they're like, so when's your birthday? And I told them, and they're like, oh, we can start a process right now, but you
Okay.
can't leave until you're 17 and a half, but we need your parents' signature. And at that point, I'd been kicked out of my house a while ago. Um, so I found my mom, and we knocked on her door with the recruiter, and she's seeing this big jacked military guy in a uniform, and he's like, he explained the situation, and she looked at me and she was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yes." I was like,
Yeah.
I've always
Now, did
watched
she
these
know this is
movies
something that you
over and
wanted to
over,
pursue,
the
or not really?
documentaries of over and over. Like,
Okay.
yeah, of course I do. And when yeah, yeah, I've talked about it, and while I was being a gang member, my relatives would be like,
Yeah.
you're gonna get in trouble, and you think they're gonna let you join because But I remember, obviously at that age, you think you know everything. I was like, well, as long as I don't get caught with anything, I can still do it. Um, and I told her, I was like, yes, I've always talked about it. I've always, growing up, you guys would say of how lucky I was to be born here in this country, and I would voice like, hey, I want to join the military, and you guys would say
Right.
that's a great way to repay everything back that this country has given us. So I joined, obviously for patriotic reasons,
Hmm.
for wanting to test myself, the warrior spirit in
Right.
me, and also because I was born and raised on food stamps. This country gave a lot to my family and I, and this was my way of repaying it back. Um, so I remember when I was talking to the recruiter, and he's talking about jobs, and so I picked my job, and then he's talking about the benefits, and I remember thinking like, I don't care about college. I'm not doing this for college.
Already
And
done.
it was funny. The recruiter's like, "Hey, by the way, I can get you your citizenship." And I was born here, man. And he goes, "Oh," he goes, "Okay." He goes, "Okay." He goes, a lot of guys have been joining, and then you can get your citizenship that way. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know." Um, and there was a part where he was talking about pay grades and ranks, and
Yeah.
he has his finger on all these like number lines, and I'm like, at that point I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. I was like, what is this? And he goes, this is how much you get paid. And I was like, and he's like, but you'll get paid more though the higher you go in rank. And I was like, and I told him, I was like, wait, you get paid for this? And he goes, well, what do you
Yep.
what do you think happened? I was like, well, I thought
Yeah.
this is how I thought it worked. They gave you a place to stay. They fed you and they gave
No.
you clothes, and then boom, we're even. And that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Because in the movies, there's no paychecks.
That's
There's
great.
no you
First
get
time you ever
fed,
heard that, I
you have
guarantee.
somewhere to sleep. They train you up, and you do your job, and that's what I thought that was.
Yeah.
So when they said, oh, so when I was like, oh, you get paid, I was like, all right, cool. You get paid, and so I needed I needed two waivers because I never got caught with something serious, right? But I did get caught with a
Yep.
few things, so we had to get waivers, and I had to talk to this major on the phone. I'm guessing it's his superiors, and he's like, I see you had a possession of a deadly weapon on school grounds. Um,
Okay.
and I was like, yes. I was like, I was just trying to defend myself. And at that point, I mean, I wasn't lying because I was like, I'm not in a gang. I wasn't in a gang then. I was like, well, I'm not in a gang. I just didn't want to. I just wanted to defend myself against certain people. I think this is going to be my chance to do something and serve my country.
Yep.
And he goes, I wish I could find out who this guy was because it was literally my life was on his line, on his hands, and he goes, don't make me regret this. And then he's like, let me talk to Sergeant so and so, and then he goes, hey, he granted you your two waivers. And I was like, oh, so happy. I was so happy. And even then at that point I had not done anything, but I was just so happy
Yeah.
because, and I didn't understand why,
Yep.
obviously that in that moment. But what it was is that I just wanted a chance. I wanted somebody to be like, "Hey, man, you know what? I'm gonna
Yeah.
give you a chance." Whether that guy just wanted recruiting numbers or he truly believed what I was telling him, I don't know. But that was my chance, and I wasn't gonna fuck it up. So I took off, and I'm not special
Okay.
operations unit or anything like that. I'm just a regular convention combat engineer, and I immediately go to Missouri for my basic training. And I'm not sure if they did this on purpose or it was just by chance, but my platoon that I was in just happened to have every single former gang member
Really?
from or criminal from because he not necessarily a gang but within the crew, and I'm talking about for
Yeah,
every
Arkansas is big.
corner
Yeah, gang territory. Yep.
of this country. We had dudes from New York, dudes from Miami, dudes from what is it called, Little Rock? Yeah, Little Rock, Texas, Arizona, you name it. And almost immediately everybody was fighting. It was almost like prison, where everyone who was Mexican kind of started hanging out, everyone who was black started hanging out, everyone who was white started, hanging out together, and immediately there was
Yeah.
fights. But I'm not.
Yep.
The military has a great way of fucking breaking everybody down, because at the end we're all friends. At the end, everyone's asking for each other's
Nice.
number. Like, hey, where are you gonna be stationed at? Asking for your emails and stuff like that. And I still talk to some of those guys to this day. Um, I remember when I was in Missouri, it was the first time I saw snow. All the guys who had already seen snow, they're like, I can tell you guys are from the hood where there's no snow because you guys are in awe. Meanwhile, the snow for us, we hate it because
Yeah.
the the
Oh
the
yeah.
life of being in a snowed in county or state. It's no joke. It's a different environment. Um, so I get stationed in Washington State, and as soon as
Yep.
I get off the van and I go to my unit, they're like, hey, new guy. They obviously it's they're fucking with us too. They're like, what's up, you cherry fucks? And they're like, hey, get your gear ready,
Damn.
get your shit ready, because tomorrow we're doing day and night shooting, day and night demo, because we leave to Iraq in less than 6 months. And I was like, oh shit, okay. And those 6 months flew, because next thing you know, I'm in Iraq. It's hot as fuck. And we
Okay.
had some action here and there, but all the guys who'd been in during the invasion were saying like, "Yo, this is nothing. This is nothing." And I remember, like, I was like, "Bro, we got mortar attacks. We, multiple IED, especially during the election, because they didn't want people to vote, and then there was some infighting within the Iraqis themselves, so
Okay.
a lot of IEDs, and but I always felt like I didn't really get the taste of war, right? For whether it's the right or wrong reason to say that,
That is a year deployment, or is this
so I
less?
was like, you know what?
As far as you like the
I was
deployment,
like,
is that 12
damn,
months or
maybe
it's
I
less than
lost my
that?
chance. So we come
12
back,
months.
and
Okay.
at this, what was that? No, 12 months. It was 12 months.
Soldier.
And
Yeah.
at this
Close.
point, I'm developing, not just as a soldier, but as a man, because I thought I was a man when I was in the gangs. No, it wasn't. I started becoming a man when I joined the military. And there was this team leader that he wasn't in my platoon, but he took me under his wing, and I would ask him, and I still talk to him to this day. I was like, hey, well, what made you you know
Nice.
want to help me? And he's like, well, you were a knucklehead, you were hard-headed, but I can tell you were eager to learn, and I can work with that. And he took me under his wing. And after that deployment, I was like, hey man, I was like, I see all these guys on the base, all these special
Okay.
forces guys and these rangers. I I want to do that. I want to see if I can do that. And he had gone to selection and not made it through, so he knew what kind of to train up. And he's like, dude, I'll train you up. I'll do it. And so he started training me. And I remember when I told my actual squad leader and my
Why?
team leader that I wanted to try out for selection, as I was in front of them with all my squad, they just started laughing at me. They be because they thought that was funny, because I was this small guy. Um, I wasn't the fastest at anything, and I wasn't good at anything, to be honest, because I just wasn't an athlete growing up. I didn't play,
Yeah.
college football. I mean, I played football for 1 year, but I had great. But I wasn't like a high school football star. I wasn't a high school wrestler or anything. I had
Yep. Meanwhile, it's all
no
about heart.
achievements under my belt. So for me to say that, they just laughed at me, and instead of being helpful, they just made fun of me. Um, and and I was like, you know what? I was like, so I just had to stand there and take it. But my friend who was a team leader in their platoon, he still kept helping me out. And next thing you
Yeah.
know, I people can notice that I was changing as a soldier and a man, and they were like, oh shit, they're like, hey, Cortez he's he's improved. And one of the things that showed my improvement is we had this competition on the base, and it was a 3 day. We're talking demo, which is demolitions. We're talking about obstacle courses, rucking, running, from this mile to that mile or whatever, and doing land af. And I remember the first day after we woke up at 5 in the morning, and we did this PT test, and then we did a ruck, and then we did a run, and then we did all the obstacles and
Really?
obstacle course.
Wow.
By I was done first, and then by the 30 minutes later, then someone else finished. Yeah. So I remember,
Okay.
thinking I just want to finish. I just want to finish, and so I was training hard because they gave us, I think it was like 2 months in advance of notice, and I was just hard during lunch. I would train hard
Yeah.
after lunch, and I was like, man, I just want to complete this thing. I wanted to do well. I didn't know that I was training that hard that I finished first on the first day. Um, and after that, I didn't know this entire time is my company was getting feedback from the sergeants that were there, and the whole company was talking about me, and I didn't know that. So by the time I was finished, my friend was like, "Hey, they were talking about you every day that you were out there," and so when I said I was gonna drop my packet to go to selection, now they were like, "Oh man, this dude's serious, and he's about to leave." But they were like, "Hey, don't leave. We're about to get attached to special
Yeah.
forces and this Afghan deployment that we're gonna do." And I didn't believe it. I was like, "Nah, I think he's just trying to stop me from dropping my packet so I can move on." But the next thing you know, they were asking for some of our guys to go with the SF guys and start learning what their weapon systems are and their vehicles and what that looks like because we're going to be attached to them. So I was like, okay, you know what, maybe I'll stick around for this deployment because now we're going to Afghanistan, and we're going to be stationed. I mean, we're going to be attached to special forces. So we get to Afghanistan, and almost immediately, this is not Iraq, right? I mean, I always say that people ask, was Afghanistan or Iraq worse? And I think it's really dependent on the individual of the
Right.
time that you went and the location that you went. Because for me, it was Afghanistan, but I know some buddies based on their stories is like, bro, Iraq was way worse. So we get to Afghanistan, and immediately we're getting mortared. Immediately, we're getting these updates
Yeah.
that like, hey, the team you're going to be embedded with, like they're in a firefight right now, um,
Cool.
and you need to be ready. So we go from a big base to this little base that they're at, and we're at 8,500 feet elevation, and we have all this kit, and these guys are like, hey,
Right.
it's winter time. It's people don't know this, but it's like unofficial official off season, as in there's no fighting. It's too cold. They don't want to fight. We don't want to fight.
Yep.
I mean, do some things happen? Yes, they do, but it's almost like a break. So they're like, hey, you guys have to get ready for spring. So they take us to a location where there's parts of a vehicle to where their friends got blown up and they died. And they're like, this right here, this is what's waiting for you during spring. So you better be ready. So they trained us up. They they showed us around the valley that we're gonna be at. And then, they left and a new team came in. And I remember saying like,
Hmm.
oh, I want to be in a firefight. I can't wait for this. I can't wait for that. And one of the guys was like, he goes, you don't want it.
Yeah.
He goes,
Be
I'm
careful
telling
what
you,
you
that
wish
this
for.
thing that you think you want, you don't want. And he was like, you guys don't know what you're asking for. And that yep, that caught my attention. I didn't ignore him. I was
Really?
like, why is he saying this? And then that deployment, we made national headlines 3 different times. There's 2 books written about it. There is one of the guys, there's TED Talks about it. There's the guys who we've been deployed with have gone on big podcasts and talked about it, been on Fox News. And this entire time, because I would think back to
Yeah.
when I was in Iraq, and the guys that I was with were saying like, "Oh, this is not a deployment. Like our other deployments were crazier." So I'm in Afghanistan, and I'm thinking what we were going through was normal. I thought dealing with suicide bombers was normal. I thought almost being overrun multiple
Yeah.
times was normal. I thought pulling IEDs with my bare hands and walking up to IEDs with explosives to blow it up was normal. I thought being woken up by gunfire, fighting, having lunch, fighting again over and over and
Yeah,
over,
exactly.
day after
So that's
day
some
was
fierce fighting
normal.
going on when you guys are over there.
Turns out no, that's not really normal. Uh, Hence why we made the national headlines 3 different times. Yes, sir. So then, I come back from this deployment, and I'm like, you know what, man, I can't. Now I go back to my regular
Yeah.
conventional unit, and I'm like, man, I can't do this. Like after experiencing the difference that we do, and being around the type of caliber of individual and soldier, I was like, I want to be around that. So I dropped my packet for 75th Ranger Regiment, and the rest was history. I made it. I was at 175, which is First Ranger Battalion, and because I was prior service, they'd had some prior service guys try to make it through selection and not make it. So
Really?
they were like, look, you're already a sergeant, and based on your job, you need to do extra
Okay.
stuff before you're officially in. And the guy was tough. He was like, hey, you're basically leasing to own. You're not in until you complete everything. So for me, selection was because I was not
What is
airborne
that?
qualified
Pre-RAS,
either.
MERAS,
I had to go to
for people who
pre-RAS,
don't know.
which in some ways pre-RAS was harder than RAS because we had a guy who was so RASP is a Ranger Assessment Selection Program, so that's the actual selection. And then pre-RASP, you might be at pre-RASP for a few days or a few weeks, but the cadre there
Right.
smoke you, and they make you do stuff, and they basically, some of them, depending on who it is, they're trying to help you be ready for RASP, right? But for us, we had a guy who was getting ready for selection for CAG, also known as Delta Force. So he would put us in his workouts in the morning. And so we would run these miles and miles and miles, or do these, leg exercises and body weight exercises. And which the funny thing is that we would do these crazy
Really?
workouts with him, go to breakfast, and as we're marching towards breakfast, we see him with a ruck on. Now he's gonna go do a ruck, and we were like, "Oh my god!" And I know he made it because after I graduated RASP, he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to selection,
Nice.
and if I don't make it, I'll see you at first because that's where
Yep.
I'm gonna
Good
go."
example to see.
And well, I was at first for 4 years, and I
Yeah.
never saw him. So he made it to Delta Force. And Yes, sir. And so that was basically my so well, before I forget, so yeah, I did pre-RASP airborne school, master breacher, so the regimental master breacher course, and then I went to CERT, which is small unit ranger tactics, and then I went to ranger school. And then so it went from October to October. I graduated RASP in October, and I graduated ranger school, which was the final thing, in October. So it took
Okay.
me a whole year to do all this stuff, and then officially I had a slot there. But the crazy thing is that
Yeah.
it was the selection, all that stuff was actually easier, um, than staying in, because once you get in regiment, you think like, oh, it's done. No, you have to
Really?
prove yourself every single day, and guys are getting RFS all the time, which means basically means you're getting kicked out, right? Um,
Okay.
yeah. So dudes are getting RFS all the time. But once you're in there, you realize why, because the tempo never stops. You are just going and going and going. And it was funny is that you know, you have to be this crazy specimen to stand out, because
Right.
when I was in my conventional unit, we had a few
Yeah.
guys who
Yeah.
were
Just
studs,
next
right?
level up. It's like
And towards the
sports.
end of me being a
Yeah.
conventional guy,
Everyone was the best
I
where
was
they
one
came
of those
from.
studs. But when you get to
Hmm.
regiment, everyone's a stud. You, yeah. So yeah. So and it was awesome. And my first section leader, and well, not first, my only section leader that I had in
Oh,
regiment
really?
was Christopher Solis. And Christopher Solis is, if I'm not mistaken, um, he is the last guy to get the Medal of Honor. So he is who I was under. He was a great human being. He was a great soldier, and I wish I would have had more time with him. I wish I would have had more.
Right.
Uh, showed my appreciation of how much because at the time, who I am now is not who I was back then. So right now, if this version was over there, I would have hung out more with the guy. I would have let him know, like, hey, man, you're a great example, because you're still doing this. You're going for that school. You're going for this, and you're
Yeah.
every day you're trying to be the best that you possibly can, and you lead by example. Um, and I wish I would have told him that stuff. But at that moment, that's not really who I was. Um, and then I
Okay.
got out. I didn't want to get out. People were telling me, like, "Hey, man, you're a lifer." Like, and I remember thinking, like, no, because my first contract was 4 years, and then to be part of the 75th Ranger Regiment, they're like, "Hey, you're gonna have to extend," and I was like, "Yeah, cool, I'll do it, whatever I have to do." Um, but some things were happening that I couldn't ignore, and one of them was my grandpa had died, and he was basically what brought my family together. He was the glue. And every time I would go back after his death, I noticed that my family was just, it was breaking apart, and
Okay.
then at this point I'd already missed the birth of my son. I was in Afghanistan. I missed the birth of my daughter. I was actually at selection for that one. And I'd been married, what, almost going 8 years at that point. And I was like, fuck, man. I was like, I miss so much of my kids. I told my wife that I wasn't gonna miss the birth. I missed it. I told her, okay, I'm not gonna miss the birth of this
Right.
son. I mean, of my daughter. I missed it. I'm not gonna miss their first birthday. I missed it, or when they walk, or their first word. And I was missing everything. And I was like, man, I think, and I promised my wife, which I promised that, to be honest, I don't really think I was trying to keep, is I told her, I was like,
Yep.
look, on his first day of school, I will be there. I promise you, I will be there. And he was almost going to be 5, which meant he was almost going to go to kindergarten or preschool, right? And I was like, and one day I get a call, and this time I'm at Master Breacher, but this time I'm not as a student. I'm there as an assistant instructor, and it's Celise, and he's like, "Hey, man, you're 9 months out of being out of the
Yeah.
military?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Yeah, but you're 9 months out of your contract ending." And almost like that, almost 8 years had gone by. I wasn't focusing on when I got out. I was just trying to be the best ranger that I could be, because even though I did have all this experience, these guys don't know that. And not to mention, this is a new organization that I am trying to
Yeah.
learn and understand, and I'm trying to learn from everybody. I didn't even care they were lower ranked than me. In my eyes, they were in this organization longer than I have, so I'm trying to learn from them, that I wasn't paying attention of what year and month it was. So when he was like, "Hey, man, you're 9 months out. What are you gonna do?" I go home. I tell my wife, like, "Hey, I'm 9 months out," and she goes, "Are you gonna?" And she said, "Are you?" She asked me, "Are you gonna get out? You made a promise that you're gonna be there for AJ. I think it's time to go home." And and God bless her heart. She is the best thing that's ever happened to me, even though I made this promise, even though I know she wants to go home after 8 years. I told her, I was like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's 4-0.
let me just do a few more. And she goes, okay, is there like a 2 year contract? And there's no 2 year contract. Um, and I was like, you know what? Let me try out for selection for to be special forces to be a Green Beret. So I go to the what is it called? It's basically a meeting that they had at the base, and then I told them, and there was a Green Beret rep, and I was like, hey, I'm a ranger. I
Yeah.
have 9 months in, I mean left. Can I go to selection? And then if I make it, I'll re up. And they're like, man, you can't do that. Like that's not how that works. And I was like, fuck. And they're like, you can extend just do like a minimum 3 years. And I tell my wife, and she's like, she doesn't want to tell me no. She's
Yeah.
like, if you want to. And I was like, you know what? No, no. I want to. I desperately want to just stay in, but my family's falling apart. I'm not seeing my kids. I'm like, you know what? And to say I went, calm and collected. No, I was kicking and screaming inside my head every single day. I remember when I told my wife,
Really.
hey, you know what? I'm gonna get out. She was
Yeah.
so happy. She fell asleep holding me, and I didn't go to bed that whole night. I didn't. I just laid there,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Fuck!
Absolutely.
What am I gonna do?" Like I didn't see a life past the military. But I was like, you know what? I was like, okay, if it's time to get out, it's time to get out. And I had heard some stories of veterans having issues. In the active
Hmm.
duty world, you kind of, unless you have like a close friend or a relative or something, you don't really worry about the veteran life. You're just focused on your job, right? But I'd heard enough to be like, hey man, I need to call one of my friends. So I actually called one of the Green Berets that I was deployed with in Afghanistan, who's part of the reason why I joined 75th Ranger Regiment. I was like, hey man, I'm about to get out.
Yeah.
I heard you're out. Like, so what should I expect? And he told me, he goes, be ready for the storm. And when he told me that, again, who I am now is not who I was back then. So I all I said was, okay, thank you, and then hung up. And but I knew what he meant, right? So I at that point I not only was I an active duty ranger, I was actually competing in Muay Thai as well. So
Okay.
I was already in the martial arts. I started training in 2010. When I got out, it was 2016. So I'd already been training kickboxing and Muay Thai for a while. And so I looked for a martial arts gym that so I can go. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to go out, I'm going to do it right. I decided I was going to go to college because I was like, you know what? No one in my family's been in college. I need to show them that look, hey, we can work
Yep.
hard with our bodies, but hey, we can use our brain too. And how do I show that to my kids, to my little cousins, to my little nephews? Well, I got to go to college. So I enrolled to go to college to be a registered dietitian, and everything was great. I'll never forget. I was in the shower with my wife, and I told her, "Man, what Link said about being ready for the storm. I don't think that applies to me because everything's great." And
Wow.
and and what and I call it the honeymoon
Okay.
stage, right? I go home. My wife and I, we've known each other since we were 7. So her family is in the same area that my family's at. They're
Yep.
happy. We're happy. I'm seeing more of my kids, and it's awesome. And it's like the honeymoon stage, but then it all starts to settle in. 8 years of suppressing everything. When my friend Pinnick died,
Right.
I didn't cry. When I went to his funeral or his memorial, I didn't cry. I didn't do it because I wanted to be a tough guy. I just didn't think that was the time and place. When I was overseas and he died and my friend Lily died, I was like, look, man, at this point I'm a sergeant. I can't be fucking
Yeah.
breaking down right here. I got a job to do. I got guys, who are underneath me. I got I'm still in the fucking shit. I don't have time for this. I'll deal with it later. And that was the story. Me telling myself, I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it later. And next thing I realized, hey man, you're a fucking shitty dad, dude. Because like I was a great army dad, as in I would leave for a long time, come back, we go to dinners, go to the movies, and then I leave again, and then rinse and repeat. whether it was for some school that I was doing or some training exercise or a deployment. I just
Yeah.
wasn't around. So next thing you know, I'm with my kids, and I'm like, dude, I don't even know what they eat. Like, what is your favorite food? Like, what do you even like to do? And same with my wife. 8 years of her being super supportive, never telling me no on anything. Our relationship wasn't that great. Now I'm not leaving. Now I'm not coming home, and they're happy. Now I'm there, and all this stuff is coming out. I'm on the verge of getting divorced. I'm sleeping now at my aunt's house on her futon. I don't even see my kids at this point. Like I said, I've known my wife since we were 7 years old, so she's been and is my best friend, and I'm not even talking to my best friend. And the GI Bill, which is the education benefits that you get as a veteran, are great. They pay for your books, they pay for your classes, so some supplies, and they give you a nice housing allowance. But what I didn't know is that all that is cut off in between semesters. So now I got to work odd jobs, and I'm working at a fucking yogurt shop
Yeah.
in Newport Beach, and these fucking kids are yelling at me why their shit's not ready. And I remember thinking, like, dude, what the fuck are you doing with your life, man? You had a house, you were a ranger, you had a family. Now you're sleeping in a futon. You don't see your kids. You're not with your wife. You have fucking privilege, fucking
Yep.
stuck up kids yelling at you like why their fucking bowl isn't ready. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck am I doing? And I
Yes.
two things I realized is, one, I'd lost my community and I lost my purpose. And a man or woman without a purpose is a lost individual. And I was like, fuck, man, I need purpose and I need community. And I realized I missed it because
That's
even like the
when
dudes
you know it's
and
bad.
when I was a ranger, or even in my conventional unit, even the dudes who I thought were kind of annoying, I even missed them.
Yeah.
I was like, those fuckers are better than some of these people I'm dealing with here. Like, you know. So I was like, okay, I need a community. So I was already training martial arts. I was like, okay, so I need a purpose. So my community, I decided to dive deeper into the veteran world, and I met this ranger, and we made friends, and we try to get people to be together, and hang out. And my purpose, I was trying to find it. I don't really know
It's
what.
great that you're
And
aware
at the
enough
same
to know
time,
that you
I'm, I'm,
needed
I'm going
help.
to therapy
Because
now
most
because I
guys would
was like,
not
yo,
have
I
done
have
that,
to
brother.
fix this. So what
Especially
do
with
I
that
need to
ego.
do? I started going to therapy, and then which helped me. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
because I was in a hole, and after I had this internal bitch fit of what was going on, I was like, okay, now what are you gonna do? You know your situation. Now what are you gonna do? Are you gonna give up? Is this gonna be the thing that defeats
Yep.
you? Not Iraq, not Afghanistan, or this selection or that score or whatever. You're telling me this is the thing that defeats you. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm done having this internal bitch fit of, why is this happening, or whatever. You know what? Okay, time to fix it. So I get my nutrition on point, my sleep, my communication skills. It just happened that during my
Okay.
curriculum, I needed to take interpersonal communication classes, which are super helpful, and I recommend that with everybody and anybody
Yeah.
because it helped me communicate. And I had to take a little bit of psychology classes and sociology, so that was also helpful. And I started going to therapy and talking about my stuff to my friends too, and then so then that helped me communicate a little bit better with my wife.
Yeah.
And the next, we moved in and got out an apartment, and now I have my family back, and which was awesome.
Yep.
And I started inviting all the veterans from my martial arts gym and school to start hanging out. And then so this is my purpose, is gathering these people. And I remember some veterans would be like, man, you have no idea what this means to me. And I was like, yeah, I do, man. Like, you see me going to school, you
Yeah.
see me
Brother,
training hard martial
everyone
arts.
thinks everyone else has it fucking
Um,
together.
but
That's the
bro,
thing
I'm
about it. Like I was
I'm
talking
just
talking
like
to
you.
Taylor
Like
one
I
night,
you don't
and he
you,
was talking
this
about
means a lot to
a
me.
couple of SEALs
Um,
specifically, and he's like, Mike, I always thought he had this shit dialed in, man. Everything is perfect in life, and
yep.
now after hearing the story on the Sean Ryan show and seeing that their life was unraveling at that point, Everyone lets you see what they want you to see, but you must realize, man, number one, you're not alone when you're going through it. Everyone is going through it at some point, and no one has got this shit figured out. It's just life, man. It comes at you every day, and every day you got to make these pivots. Every day.
Uh, yes, sir. And so the events at my house were me getting UFC pay-per-view, getting pizza, and buying the beer. And next it's going great, but the honest truth is,
Yeah.
financially it's not. And my wife is like, "Hey, I'm pregnant. We got a third baby coming." I hold on, let me close this door real quick. So she goes, "Hey, I'm pregnant. Yeah, I know these events mean a lot to you and the veterans, but like we can't keep doing this. We keep going negative into our account, or we're barely making rent."
Right.
And I was like, "Fuck." I was like, "She's right," but I don't want to stop doing this stuff because this is my purpose. It's not her. It's my poor planning. And it's like, man, my purpose is about to be taken away. I need to figure this out. My wife is like, "Hey, we got to keep doing this." And so since I gained a small following on social media for sharing my combat footage, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start a t-shirt company. Um, but first I was like, oh well, I need a logo. And even though I buy shirts with like skulls and guns, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that guy with a skull, a shirt, hat. I mean, there's already plenty of it. I got to figure something out. So
Yep.
my I always have this thing for Halloween, and overseas there's pictures and videos of me wearing skeleton gloves in Afghanistan, even though they're not issued. I just wanted to wear it. Right. I also had a skull bandana, and my son. I was watching The Office with my wife, and my son drew a pumpkin, and he's like, "Oh, this is for you," and I was like, "Oh, thank you," and I loved it. So I was like, you know what, this is going to be the logo for my company, and I remember thinking like, okay, I don't have much money. I told my wife, look, I'm going to start this Shopify. I'm going to make some stickers, and if it doesn't work, I promise I'll stop doing this.
Okay.
So I I made two stickers, and I was like, hey, who wants a sticker? And within like an hour or so, all 200 stickers were spoken for, gone,
Wow.
boom. And and next thing I didn't know how to ship anything, so I bought a bunch of envelopes, and my wife and I are writing people's addresses on the envelopes all over the country and the world, because wherever there's a military base, like these stickers were being sent to.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I have something here now. So I decided to make shirts, and around the same time, Andy Stumps asked me to be on his podcast. Um, so did Mike Glover, and then I went on a podcast with JT from Black Rifle Coffee, and I was making
Right
Can you
back.
hear me?
Yep. Now you're coming in again. I don't know what the hell's going on with this thing. I'll have to get these guys to edit it all out.
Um, for whatever reason, on my screen, I have a percentage. Yours says 99, and mine says 24.
Yeah, I guess it's uploading a little bit slow on your end for whatever reason. Usually it doesn't affect it, but yeah, I have no idea what's going on. But yeah, I couldn't even begin to imagine. I am definitely not computer literate, so
Use my cellular, my data. I don't know.
I guess yeah, we could try that.
All right, let me see.
Maybe the Wi-Fi's weak. You're not coming in good if you can hear me.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know why. No, no,
Yeah,
nothing's changed now. Now all of a sudden,
it sounds a little better now.
yeah. Okay. Now I'm going up. Now mine says 52% better than 30.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Screw it. Let's see. Maybe we'll just keep staying good. Hopefully. Cross my fingers, baby.
It keeps going up. So now we're at 70%. So 71, 70, 70. Okay, I think we're good now. I don't know what
All right,
happened.
good. Yeah, I have no idea. I'll have to get those guys to edit everything out, but it'll be smooth on the final products. That's all I care about.
Okay. So yeah, so I was like, okay, so we make 200 stickers, we sell all 200 stickers, and we're sending them all over the world. And I at this point I'm like, man, I'm not a businessman. I'm not like an entrepreneur. I don't even know what to do. And I was like, okay, I have to get a name for it. So I was like, you know what? It's a pumpkin. I'll make an Instagram page for it. Let's see. And I said, decide, you know what I'm gonna call it. Let's just see if on Instagram pumpkin is taken. Of course, pumpkin is taken. What about the pumpkin? The pumpkin is taken. And I was like, what do I call this thing? And because my time from the hood and all that, the word OG as in like original. I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? How about I call it the OG pumpkin? And then I look up on Instagram, the OG pumpkin is not taken. So that's the name.
Done. Nice.
And like I was saying, around this time, people like Addie Stumps and Mike Glover are asking me to be on their podcast, and because they have such huge reach, and I'm sharing my story, I'm and because of them, and I'm now making almost 10 grand a month on
Really?
stickers and
Wow.
shirts,
Holy
and
shit.
you would see the spikes, like it would literally be, I went on a big podcast and then boom, huge spikes. And I was like, I just did this company to cover the UFC, cover the food and the beer, and I'm like, what am I going to do with all this? I was like, okay. I was like, well, I'm going to give it back. Like this wasn't for me to make money. It was for my purpose. So I'm like, okay, well, you know what? And that means I can reach more veterans. So then around the same time, it was also COVID, and or obviously, actually before COVID. So what I would do, because the page was so small, I would buy Domino's and Pizza Hut gift cards. I would scratch off the codes, and I would
Yep.
be like, hey guys, and the guys in the barracks or veterans, that are just at their house and hanging out with friends. Hey, pizza's on me today, and
Nice.
I would do stuff like that, and then I started doing bigger events, and then COVID happened, and people are losing their jobs, people are not doing so well, and meanwhile I'm going on these podcasts and making all this money, and I'm like, dude, I gotta figure something out. So then I went to Target and I bought, and I would put like $400 on gift cards, and I would scratch it off, and I would be like, hey man, if if this is for kids and the elderly, like if you got kids or grandparents that need something, and I know people aren't going to work and money's being an issue, because like this is before the government was sending some checks every now and then.
Right.
I was like, hey, spend like $50, and I would do that, and then I started dropping off food at places, because like I said, I grew up on food stamps, and I grew up on going all these programs that were either state, local, or federal, federally run. And I started dropping off food at food banks and areas where I used to be the guy waiting to, the
Yeah.
kid waiting to get stuff. And I started this thing called Range Day and Tacos. So I would buy vehicles, and we would shoot in and out of the vehicles, and I would have a taco guy. And I remember one year I did like 8 of these things, and each one I was trying to make them as big as possible. My last one, I had a massage therapist there.
Really?
I had a banda, which is like live music, Mexican live music.
Okay.
Um, I had multiple cars. I had CBD giveaways. I had food giveaway. I had all this stuff just to make it, you know, more entertaining, and because some of the veterans didn't want to come to the UFC fights because they were like, oh, I don't watch fights,
Yeah.
or I'm like, but it's not about the fights, man. It's just about
The
community.
brotherhood. Yeah.
But one of the things I realized is that look, not every veteran likes martial arts, but guess what? Most veterans like to shoot.
Yep.
So the vehicles and tacos range days wasn't it didn't really have to do about training. It had to do more about getting people together and hanging out, and it worked.
That's
Um,
awesome. Now, how many people are you getting at this point? How many vets are coming out?
like 90.
Nice.
and and then I met this other my buddy Benji, one of my buddies who I met online, who was a big supporter of OG Pumpkin. He's like, hey man, I like the world is yours shirt that you're coming out with. Can me and my friends get some? We're over here in Afghanistan. And I was like, dude, I can't. Like, it's a pre-order. They're not even made. Like, I don't even have one. It's just a sketch. It's a mock-up.
Right.
But I was like, but I'll send you one. And then he got killed in Afghanistan.
Sorry to
So,
hear.
so we I went to the funeral, the memorial, and I remember there was this charity event that I went to go support the widow. Because Rod's his name was Rod, my friend who died, but his friend, he was like, hey, who was Rod's really close friend, was like, hey man, I told Ronnie, the widow, I told Ronnie I was gonna go to this charity event, but I can't go anymore. He's like, dude, can you go? And I was like, done. I'm going. Where? What? And he goes, it's in Virginia, Bedford, Virginia. It's called the Hero Games Charity.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, I'll be there. And I was still going to school, so I just left school and I went to go support Ronnie. And the Hero Games um, charity is this special operations brother, and um, well, they're two brothers. One of them owns a CrossFit gym, and the other one is a Green Beret. And actually, he's actually not out now. But I guess the brother who had the gym was like, "Hey, man, can you run us through this like selection style workout?" And the brother was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, sure, I'll do it." And his his members loved it so much they were like, "Hey, let's do this again, or can we do this yearly?" And the Green Beret brother, being who he is, wanted to make it bigger and better. But he's like, to make it bigger and better, we should charge to supply all
Yeah.
But they started making money, and they're like, well, the point wasn't to make money; it was just for the community. And they're like, how about this? How about now we give all the money to a Gold Star family? And
Nice.
and so that's where Ronnie came in, right? Because now they're giving the money to Gold Star family members, and and so I met the brothers, and they were awesome. They're my friends. I've actually been there now multiple times as cadre, um, to go help out during the Hero Games charity, and I try to go every year, but it's hard because of work.
Yeah.
Uh, but I have been there more than once, and I noticed there was a skateboard company that was one of the sponsors, and as the event was about to be done, um, the Green Beret brother is like, "Hey man," he's like, "Hey, that company's based out of California. Aren't you based out of California?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am." So when I get home, I went back to school. I caught up on my missing homework and all that stuff, all my assignments, and then I was like, you know what, man, let me reach out to that company and thank them for supporting this event. And so I did. It was a skateboard company, and I actually still skate to this day. I was like, hey man, it means a lot that you supported this. Um, and he's like, and I was like, hey, if you're ever in the area, I actually do some community work here. And then he's like, actually, I do too. I'm gonna do a toy drive. You should come to the skate park. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm going to the skate park, and so I drove 2 hours to the skate park. I brought some toys, and this guy, he's a former martial art raider. His name's Benji. He pulls up in this busted Honda Pilot, and it's filled with name brand skateboards and shoes for the kids. And I was like, you know what, man, I like this guy, and we became close friends. Um, so him and I started doing veteran events together,
No,
and
nice.
we decided to do a uh, skateboarding event, right? And I had already done some events, and I remember one time I got this mini ramp for for my alleyway, uh, and I held this little contest, and I had like 90 people there. So I remember when he's like, "Hey, let's turn this warehouse into a skate park, and then we'll have like food and stuff like that." And how many people you think we can get? I was like, well, I almost got like 100 last time just at my house, so I think we can break 100.
Oh yeah.
And the goal was just to be at 100. We ended up having 400 people there,
Wow.
and then
That's impressive.
we did it again the next year, and we had 800 people there. And um, because Benji knows, I feel like he knows everybody. He
Yeah.
knows CJ from the Ramones, so we had CJ from the Ramones play there, and
Nice.
one of his guys was like, and we had the Aquabats play there too, and and one of the guys was like, "This is the most organized illegal event I've ever been to." He
That's
goes,
great.
"You guys, because it's not like we had permits. We didn't have permits for
Yeah.
any of this.
Yeah, exactly. That's
We
awesome.
he goes, you guys have security guards, you have porter johns, you have food, you even have somebody for first aid on standby. And so we became friends, and then he started working for a defense strategies group. So at this point, I had joined defense strategies group because of Mike. Mike is who I met at a range, who gave me the idea to
This
do
is Michael
the
Dowd,
yeah, Mike O'Dowd.
former SEAL. Okay.
Yep, he's the one who gave me the idea to do the vehicles and toggles range day, because when I went to a course and he happened to be the instructor there during this vehicle combat course, you could, during the scenario, there's only two people that can go in the vehicle at once. And what I realized is that all the guys that were waiting because they were so happy and excited to do this cool thing were talking and socializing and kind of like becoming friends.
Yeah.
So that's where I got the idea to be like, okay, some of these veterans don't want to come to my house for the fights. Hey, let's come to the range. And I knew there was going to be a time where they would socialize and talk, and hopefully, well, they made friends, and they
Yeah.
do. So, you know, Mike started Defense Strategies Group, and he asked me to join. So I've been part of it since day one. And then Benji came along, and then Zach, who actually is one of your previous guests. I met him at an OG Pumpkin open mat. So I expanded from doing shooting events and UFC events. I would go to my martial arts gym. I would ask my coach if I can use the gym. They would say yes every time, and I would have drinks and food and some cool little giveaways. And I remember this one particular open mat. There was like, I don't even know. I think maybe like 90 people that joined. 80, 90 people that came by throughout the day, and one of them was Zach. And I started following him, and I really appreciated that he was a martial artist, and that even though he was out, he was still keeping up with his skills.
Yeah.
Because it really bums me out when I see guys from the special operations community get out and then just stop doing everything.
Yeah, it's
um,
amazing.
and
Just
I'm like,
completely.
yeah, I'm like, hey man, you were a warrior. Like,
Hmm.
know, are you telling me you were just a warrior when you were in? You're not a warrior anymore. So we're building this company out, and we're growing little by little. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of shooting companies out there. So
Right.
how do we stand out? Well, I feel like we stand out in a way that, well, we are all always trying to be better at things, right? We're we're training martial arts. We're doing some shooting. We're improving on our shooting skills, and we're trying to build community. And throughout the our hard work, life always happens, right?
Yeah.
Life happens, and it doesn't wait for you to be ready. And I remember one time I saw Benji. You can tell, right, when someone's not feeling so well. I
Yeah.
could tell something was bugging him, and he tells me, I knew his wife had health issues. I didn't know how bad the health issues really were. So I asked him. I was like, "Hey, man, like, what's going on? Some?" And he's like, "Oh, no, nothing, nothing. Everything's okay." And I was like, "Dude." After an hour, I was like, "Dude, it's in your face, man. Like, what the fuck is going on?"
Yeah.
And he
Talk
goes,
to me. I
"Well,
seriously want to know.
yeah." He
Yeah.
goes, "Hey, his wife Larissa." He's like, "Hey, Larissa's kidney thing is getting worse. She's got stage 5. She's about to be stage 5 kidney failure. I wanted to donate a kidney, but I'm not even O positive." And right then and there, I knew I was O positive, so I was like, "Bro, I'll give her one." And and
Wow.
he kind of like brushed it off and laughed, and then after a while, I was like, "Bro, I'm serious. Like, what do I have to do?" And he's like, "Well, you have to go, get tested, this and this." So I go to UCLA, I get tested. They're like, "Hey, They call me. They're like, "Hey, you are actually a perfect match. Like, do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." So it wasn't that easy because I had to do 8 months of testing, retesting, because they want to make sure that it's not just a blood test. You're
Yeah.
talking about extensive blood work, um, CT scans, X-rays, heart scans, everything. Um, and then after it was all said and done, I'll never forget. I got the call, and it said UCLA. And at that point, usually everything was done by email. So when they were calling, I was like, I think this is the call. And they called me. They're like, the board approved you. Do you want to donate a kidney still? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, when? And I was like, tomorrow.
Yeah.
And she laughed and she goes, well, not that easy. Okay, we have
Yeah.
to schedule it in. So they were like, how about October? And I was like, perfect. So October in 2022 is when I donated a kidney to Larissa. She did a full recovery. I've done a full recovery since then because she actually does jujitsu as well. She's earned her purple belt. Um,
Nice.
so life is good. Um,
Brother, you want to hear an incredible story? This is a small world. My cousin Michelle just left here. She was staying in South Florida. My wife and I for the past week. Her daughter rides horses. And our brother Paul, who lives in Houston, donated a kidney to a stranger, essentially. His wife told him about one of the kid's friends whose father was going through it, needed a kidney. And she's like, go get tested, Paul. Just tell him, go get tested. He goes and gets tested, not thinking anything's going to come of it.
yeah,
And a year later, he's on the table giving up a kidney. And I was talking to Michelle this morning because I told her about your story. And I'm like, it's amazing. That Angel also did that. And I said, I don't know if I can do that. And it's not that I wouldn't donate a kidney. It's that I I don't know if I could donate to a stranger. I mean, this is a little bit different because you're friends with Benji, but
yeah.
um, just in anticipation, God forbid, a family member needs it down the line. No problem. I would give it to them, but to give it to a total stranger is mind-boggling to me, and so impressive, so unselfish. And not that you guys were she's not your family or anything like that. It's nothing you had to do. Just as volumes about my cousin, about you as men, and what you guys did. In fact, it spurred me to I think I'm going to give talk to University of Miami to give a portion of my liver to someone else because that regenerates and I could do that.
Yeah.
And God forbid I ever have to give the liver up. Oh, excuse me, one of the kidneys up. I want to have that, but so maybe I'm selfish in one respect, but I don't know. But the fact that you guys did that is just it speaks volume about you guys as men, and I applaud you because it's amazing.
And you know what? It was pretty easy because she reminds me a lot of my wife. Because obviously I've talked to Benji a lot extensively about, and him and I have similar. We have different stories, but similar as in, we were so focused on our military career that we did not do that great well of taking care of our families. And meanwhile, our wives were super supportive, holding down the house, raising the kids. And so she reminded me a lot of my wife. and she is an amazing mother. She's a super supportive wife, and so it was easy. Who she is made it extremely easy to do it. Um, since then, we've had a full recovery, and right now we're at a moment where the company, the small company that we started, is actually getting bigger. We have a
Nice.
training facility in Beverly Hills. Um, we've gone because of the company. I've gone to work on National Geographic. We've trained the Stallone family for their reality show, so we're
Yeah, I
actually.
saw that episode. What is so funny? I have a marketing team that helps me with the YouTube, and as I'm introducing Zach at the end of his bio, and I'm like, and if he looks familiar, it may be because you watched the Stallone reality show. So I get hit up by this girl Sarah that works for the company. She's like, Mike, it's so funny. She's like, I see you introducing Zach, and I'm looking at him, and I'm saying he looks so familiar to me. And then you say that about the Stallone thing. She's like, oh my god, I saw an episode. I knew him. So it was just cracking me up that you knew him from there.
Yeah, and we've gotten to do cool projects like that. We've trained a couple SWAT teams, PDs, and the average civilian who's like, what, I want to be able to defend myself. Either with my body through martial arts or firearms training. So we do all that. Um, and I'm honestly, I'm at a point right now where everything's good. I was talking
Yeah,
to my friend the other day. They're like, "Hey, man, how's life?" And I was like, "Bro, I'm healthy, right? I've recovered from the kidney donation. My relationship with my kids is so much better. My marriage is awesome, and I can't complain, man.
that's
But
beautiful.
but it took hard work though,
Yeah,
because how do I go from not being such a great dad to being a much better dad? Is work, and one of the things that helped me was psychedelic therapy. I know some people um may not are not for it, or maybe it's not think it's for them, but I did everything in my life that I could to better myself, and which in psychedelic therapy was the one thing that was missing. um
can you talk about your experience a little more? Because guys and girls are watching this, and I'm a huge proponent for the rest of my life. I will be, and a lot of people are not that familiar, and they hear these things about these plants-based medicines. They look at you like you have three heads. But number one, it's the revolution is coming. They are so effective, but I need to have warriors like yourself come on and talk about it because it's one thing if I get a guy walking around Birkenstocks and playing drums and the flute. But when I get
yeah.
warriors talking about it, guys will sit up and listen because you are them and they are you. And they've gone through the same exact things that you've gone through. So can you just expand on your experience with the psychedelics,
Yeah.
please?
So Michael Dowd and I we'd already been friends for a while, and one day he's like, "Angel, I think you should do some ketamine therapy," and I was like, "Nah, I don't need it. I don't need it." And he told me that for about a year,
Now,
and
was he
it was
sensing something that was going on with you to kind of lead you to have that conversation?
well. I think what he saw is that the way he described it is even though I was social, I was quiet, and I wasn't very open. Even though, like, if I want to hang out with somebody, yeah, I'd go hang out. But I'd never been like, "Hey, man, I love you, dude. And if you need something, reach out,
Me either, bro.
or I appreciate you." Like, we weren't doing anything. Um, we weren't doing anything like that. I wasn't very vocal about how I was
Yeah,
feeling, stuff like that. So Mike goes, you need to do it. And it was actually at one of the Range and Tacos event, the OG Pumpkin events, where he's giving a talk to all the veterans. And I had already heard this talk before, and I actually have a picture of that somebody took. It's that as he's addressing the group, I'm on the side, and I'm on the side like, oh, this message is for them. But me being on the side of Mike, when he said that, I was like, you know what? I need to do it. I need to do it because my marriage was getting better. My relationship with my kids was getting better. But you know what? If he's saying all this, and I truly want to be the best version of myself, and you know, what would it hurt?
right.
And so I tell Mike, we set it up. I do it in a professional setting with a nurse and a therapist, and 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 the way they
And this
do
was
it.
ketamine.
Yes, the way
Okay.
they do it is first they do therapy, then they do the session, which they call the journey, and then afterwards you do therapy. So I talked to a therapist, and it was this guy who, you know, he looked like a sandal wearing type of guy, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna ask you the same question 5 times, and I remember thinking like, well, I'm gonna answer you the same way five
Yeah.
times, but first he said like, why are you here, and I told him why I was here, and then he goes, and what do you expect to get out of it? And then I told him that, and then I answered it, and then he goes, and what would that do for your day to day? And then I told him that, and then he told me, what would that do with the relationships you care about the most? And I remember, like, I'm like, oh man, he's basically asking the same thing, but it's getting deeper and deeper. And you know what? I I liked that therapy session, so I went to the journey with a little bit open mindedness, and it was high doses of ketamine. And when I got out of it, I remember feeling something on my face, and I wiped it away, and then I realized, oh, those are tears. And I don't know when, but at some point I started crying. And when I took off my face mask, and Mike was there in the room with us, I remember just looking over Mike, and he was so happy for me, and he nodded his head and I nodded back because I knew exactly what he meant, um, and how I felt, and he knew how I felt. And the thing it was, with the psychedelic therapy, you can't really drive afterwards, because
Right.
mentally, cognitively, you're not all there. So the deal was, I was gonna go with Mike, do the journey, right, the psychedelic therapy, and then I was gonna stay at his house, and then the next day I was gonna go home. But because of what I was thinking about during my journey is, I didn't think about anything material. I didn't think about any names or roles or anything that could be given to me, like titles or anything like that. I thought about my family and I thought about my kids. And at one point I thought that I died. And I remember thinking like I lost my opportunity to tell my kids what they really mean to me, and try my best to have a close relationship with them and tell my wife everything that I should have told her. So based on what I was experiencing, I told Mike, I was like, hey Mike, I just want to go home. And he goes, okay, how about this? How about you take a nap? We'll get some food in you, and then I'll drop you off. And I was like, okay. And he said, are you sure you don't want to stay? I was like, no, 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 I want to go home. So I took a nap, I ate some food, and I got home not late, but my wife wasn't expecting me, and but I was so mentally exhausted that I was like, yeah, I just wanted to come home, and then I just walked to bed, and then I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, she was making eggs, and I go up to her, and I told her, and I just calmly, I was like, hey, I was like, just let me talk to you. Come over here. And I'd never said that to her in that tone, and the face expression and body language, that she kind of knew it was serious. And I'm standing in front of her, and I told her, I was like, you know what? I realized that for the last um, couple of years, the version that I've been lately is not what you got for the first 8, 9 years of our marriage. I put you not second or third or fourth or fifth. I put you dead last on my priorities. I neglected our marriage. Um, you've been super supportive, and I have not been the friend, the lover, the husband that I should have been, and I'm sorry. And the look on her face was, in shock and awe. And she said, there's been things I've been meaning to tell you that I didn't just want to tell you. I wanted you to understand and feel it.
Hmm.
And 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 the way this therapy treatment went is that the next day I had to go back for session number two. So I did session number two, and I thought about my kids, right? And And so this time around, because I knew how I felt after the first session, I told Analia, I was like, hey, how about you drop me off at Mike's and then you pick me up, so Mike doesn't have to drive me home. And she was okay. And I get into the car and I'm mentally exhausted. But I needed to tell this to my kids, especially to my oldest, my boy, and my girl. I turn around, and at this point, we already have our third kid, but I've been around her life. I saw her be born. I've been more around her life than I have with my two older ones, especially my oldest kid. And it
Okay.
happened to be summertime, so I tell my son AJ and my daughter Ari. I was like, AJ, Ari, and I was like, especially you, AJ. I realize I've been absent in your life. I realize that I don't really know who you guys are, and I want to get to know you this summer. And and sometimes I think we all forget that because they're kids, we think that maybe they don't understand things or that they're dumb. My son started tearing up and he goes, you saying this makes me happy. And I knew it. I knew that there was a disconnect between him and I knew there was a separation because sometimes if we were watching a movie and I got next to him, he would kind of like scoot over and I would tell my wife, I'm like, look, he like almost doesn't want me to be so near him. And she goes, no, it's just him wanting to give you space, on the couch. And after me telling him this, that I was sorry for being awake for so long, the relationship between him and I got so much better, and next thing you know, he's cuddling up right next to me on the couch, and we're watching TV, and the relationship between him and I and my daughter got so much stronger. And and that was the missing piece. Like at that point, yes, was I trying to be a good dad? Yes. Was I trying to be a good husband? Yes. But I was not vocal in my intentions and emotions and my thoughts and feelings with my son and my daughter and my wife. That now I became very vocal. That they were so surprised, and my son, when he was tearing up and he said that like I was so thankful for Mike telling me like, "Hey, man, you need to do this," and
Yeah.
not giving up on me after a whole year of me telling him no, it's not for me. I don't need it, and he stayed persistent, and that right there was a game changer, a life changer, you know. And my son is the relationship with him and I is so strong right now, with the stronger than it's ever been. Same with my daughter and my youngest and my wife, and it has to do with psychedelic therapy. But
Yeah.
I tell people it's not just the therapy. You have to address your sleep, your nutrition, how you communicate with people, um, and what you do day to day. If you think you're gonna do psychedelic therapy and it's gonna be the end all be all, no, it's a tool, and how that tool is used also is dependent on the individual. And also, I think you have to want to change in order
Yeah.
for it to
Oh
work.
yeah.
Because
$100%.
I've met some people who've done psychedelics, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, damn, dude, you've done psychedelics and you're still a piece of shit. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's because they don't want to change.
Yep.
You know, they don't want to change. Um, so that to me is been a game changer, and so that's basically been my life with psychedelics. Um, and one of the things that I noticed is after the psychedelic therapy, even though I was open with my wife and kids more, um, it's not that I was a heavy drinker, but if it was a birthday party or something, I would drink. I went over a year without drinking, and my friends would be like, "Hey, do you want to go out?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll go out with you." They're like, "You want to drink?" I was like, "No." I was like, "I actually don't want to do any of that." And at that point, I'd already been experimenting with mushrooms, not at a high dose
Yep.
like ketamine, but I remember I had a bag of mushrooms because I had heard and read that microdosing is good, and that bag went to waste because I didn't even want to do that. Like I didn't even want to microdose anymore. I didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Um,
You hear it over and over. That's definitely a common sentiment amongst guys. I was never really that big of a drinker in the past few years, so it was nothing that affected me. But as far as I think it's important when you're talking about communication, us as men, we're horrible communicators, to make a general blanket statement.
Yeah.
And, if you look back, because, there's one thing when I've journeyed with psilocybin, I've kind of questioned the origination of my behaviors. And it's taken me back to myself as a kid. And I watched, and I've been inside my house as a kid watching again. And we're not taught to communicate, unfortunately, especially with the upbringing you had with your dad, my dad, he literally told me like showing emotion is weakness. So
Yeah.
you never taught how to do this. And it's a learned behavior for the most part. So if you're going through life, you just stuff and stuff and stuff. And it sounds so weird, man, but you almost feel weak when you're talking about emotion. When you come to someone like now, bro, I'll tell my buddies all the time, I love you, brother. Like I can never have said that prior to a year ago. And you know what it does? The medicine doesn't cause the healing. The medicine tears down the walls that are like surrounding you and have you
Yeah.
trapped. And then it allows you to look at different things that maybe you never looked at before, or things that you have looked at, but now you're looking at them in a totally different perspective. And you realize there's so many ways what is important in life and what is not. Collectively, there's so many things that it does. As you know, like I talk about being reborn and not as a religious experience. Like I just feel like I was a new man after that Friday night of me drinking for the first time. And being allowed, like I filmed after that weekend, I filmed a Facebook Live to kind of tell people about my journey, what I've been going through with the
Yeah.
PTSD, unrealized, and it's an important message too, I think, for guys. I always thought PTSD was caused by seeing your brother or sister next to you get killed. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's one way, one causation, but mine was being inside the most devastatingly intimate moments of other people's lives. Either I'm delivering a death notification, or I'm at the house when someone was just committed suicide, was killed in a homicide. Even natural DOAs, man. It's almost like their life was before Mike showed up and after Mike showed up. And it's completely different life from before I showed up and when I'm leaving your house. And, we're not again, we're taught that showing emotions is weakness as men, and that was a huge thing with Zach that really caught me when I was watching his story for the first time. That I thought it was beautiful. He had this love for his father, and never lost that love when his father. He had a drug problem. He's spoken about it in public, so it's not like I'm airing dirty laundry. But he never lost that love for his father, and it was just such a beautiful thing to me. And we need to appreciate as men that our inability to experience and talk about emotion is so deep and everyone understands that when we do, like it's amazing the feedback I get from other people. I was just on a podcast and the lady was thanking me. She was almost in tears, thanking me for being able to be vulnerable. Because we're never vulnerable. So yeah,
Yeah.
these plant-based medicines allow guys like me and you to essentially be different versions of ourselves and learn that speaking about these emotions is good for us, man. It makes us healthy human beings. We're able to carry on healthy relationships after that. You're able to have a beautiful relationship with your son. You're able to now have this relationship with your wife evolve into something that's now on another level that you probably never thought possible. Because I know with my wife, it's the same thing. I was talking to DJ Shipley. I went for training with their company about a year ago, and we were talking about individual journeys. He was Ibogaine, I was ayahuasca, and I'm like, brother, I was not proud of the man I was before. I'm like, I'm proud of the man I am now, and it's beautiful to be able to feel things. Life is beautiful. There are some shitty parts to it, and you have to get through them. You have to feel that pain and heal from that pain. But man, life is beautiful.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It really is, and you're a perfect illustration of that. And I love the fact that Michael Dowd kept on you because that's another thing too. You go up to a man and you're like, "Angel, how you doing?" And you're like, "I'm all right." Angel's not all right. I'm here to tell you guys, and don't think that it's trying to kind of speak to him further and see what's going on. If Angel's all right or Angel's not all right, but he doesn't want to talk, Angel's gonna be like, "I'm cool, brother. Living a dream. How about you?" That's it. But for a man to even say, "I'm all right," he's trying to tell you that he wants to speak to you, but he does not know how. And that's
Yeah.
hugely important as men to realize that. You do now, I do now. Mike did a perfect. I love what he did to you, just kind of not giving up on you, knowing that you need something, you're not able to ask for it now, or you weren't ready for it now, but just kind of, he's not bugging the shit out of you. He just, he's your friend, cares
Yep.
about you, and just periodically he's going to check in with you. And finally, you decide it was time, and you literally change your life.
Yep. And I'm so grateful for that. And I've talked about Michael Dowd, um, another podcast, but I don't feel like I went to in great detail with him. But he's been like a big older brother to me. And I tell you what, people always give me credit for the things that I do, and whether it's the community work, the kidney donation, or my time in the service, or the community work that I do, to this day. Um, but I'm just a accumulation of all the leadership that I've had, the great people that I've come to learn from. I was helped, so I want to help people, and it goes, and that's how it spreads, right? It's not going to
Yep.
be fast. It's not going to be easy sometimes. That's how that spreads within our community, within our lives. Um, so I'm super grateful that there's podcasts like this podcast, other podcasts that are talking about it, because we need to,
Yeah.
because this downfall that we as a community we've been through, whether it's getting lost in alcohol, or pain medication, or divorces being, the divorce rate, or the relationships with our children, it needs to improve, and I think this is a, a step in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. What was done for me watching a Sean Ryan podcast, as I told you before, Eddie Penny being the guest, this is his company, this is not a proclamation, literally changed my life. And that's why I created this podcast, because I want to do the same, pay it forward. I have guests like you on, and someone's life is going to be changed today watching Angel Cortes talk about his life story. And they're going to realize, I don't know what aspect of your story is going to change your life, but something is going to do it. And, I was talking to Taylor one day, and I'm like, brother, they're all ordinary people. You and I were ordinary men, but you've done extraordinary things with your life. And that's what I want to illustrate. You've gone through this journey, you've experienced profound pain, but you've healed. You're a healthy man now, and this is how you did it. And for those guys and girls going through it now who think you're alone, I promise you, you're not even close to being alone. Fortunately or unfortunately, there's hundreds of thousands, if not more, out there going through it. But look at Angel's story. There's nothing special. I don't mean that in a disrespectful manner. You're an ordinary man, just like I am. Look what he's gone through, and he's healed, and he's got a beautiful life, and he appreciates it every day. So know that there is hope and inspiration for you guys, and that's why I bring you stories like Angels, because I want to show you this could be you. There is nothing remarkable about anyone, but you must raise your hand and ask for help. You can't expect someone is going to come to your house and throw you over the shoulder and take you somewhere, and you're going to be good. Doesn't work like that. You're the one that must raise your hand, and then I promise you, there are people out there, a bunch of people that will help you get what you need. So, brother, I appreciate you telling your story, because it takes a lot to be vulnerable, and basically lay out your life in front of millions of people potentially, and telling me my missteps, um, things I've done poorly. No one wants to do that. It just takes balls to do it. So I congratulate and thank you for coming on and doing that.
No, thank you for having me on, and let me share my story, and hopefully this helps somebody.
Absolutely, guarantee it will. So, Angel, please, all the links will be in the bio, but tell people if they need to get in touch with you or want to get in touch with you, how to do so,
Uh,
what you're doing.
Yes. So the company, it's Defense Strategies Group, right? So our training facility in Beverly Hills is called Training Center LA. The company that I still do my community work through is called the OG Pumpkin, or OG Pumpkin. You can Google it and it'll come up. My Instagram is Angel G Cortez 175, Cortez with an S. Um, and yeah, I do most of the stuff on Instagram. I know people do emails, but I'm like, I'm an Instagram guy.
Yep.
uh, but come to any veteran event or non-veteran event, because we have non-veteran events, or come in the training facility and just stop by, say hi, and hang out or whatever. It doesn't even have to be a class. You can just come by and just say hi, which a lot of people do, which makes me feel good that people are feel that comfortable to be like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go over there and just say hi.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I can see people watching you and Zach on a podcast, not Mike, but kind of feeling the warmth that you guys exude and feeling like they can come in and say hi to you guys. You know, it's almost like um, know you guys, and just like I said, like the warmth you guys exude. You know that you guys are for real. Um, this is this is pure, and what you're doing is noble, and I love it. I love what you guys are doing. So I thank you again for coming on. It was my honor to have you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Guys, take care, and we will see you soon.